Steph Paul from Something for Kate. Welcome to Australian Musician.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We're talking today because you've got this great new band album out, The Modern Medieval. Tell me the pros and cons of creating an album during a pandemic lockdown.
Well, we actually finished this record a year ago. Yeah, so we had actually completed mixing the record over in Canada about a year.
Pretty much a year ago.
A year to this day, almost. So we, it was more that we had this finished album, and we just kind of really had to work out whether we wanted to release it during, the pandemic. By the time the first single was coming out, we were just, it was March, so things were starting to be, quite serious then. So
yeah, tell me about the album title. What does that mean?
Well, I guess it's sort of playing with historical perspectives, and the fact that in medieval times, as you'd know, you had the sort of a small ruling class controlling the vast majority of the wealth and resources, while most people sort of worked away their whole lives without much hope of changing their situation, and people sort of retreated into their factions and their tribes, and I feel like the past few years things have started to look not so dissimilar to that for a number of different reasons. So it's sort of a little bit of a joke, if you like, about that, but it's really, I think the album takes a lot of different points of view from different points in time, including the future. I think in recent times I've started writing lyrics often from the point of view of someone a century from now, looking at what our present looks like. It's just a different perspective to imagine. So yeah, I guess the title reflects that sort of like a time mashup.
Yeah, cool. Well, once you decide you're going to do a new Something for Kate album, do you discuss a sonic picture as a whole? Do you look back at the last album? Or is there a bigger discussion, or is it more a matter of just dealing with a new bunch of songs?
I think we do think about things in the context of our back catalogue a little, but it's also, there's quite a gap of time between Something for Kate records with this album. So, in that time, the three of us, our tastes change or evolve, and as people, things, you change and your aesthetic might change a little, but also the collection of songs themselves will help us dictate what it needs to sound like in order to get the ideas across. And this record, I think that even the title, The Modern Medieval, and the first few songs we wrote for it, we knew that it was not going to be a sort of a lo-fi affair. I think the ideas were quite musically quite grand, so we knew that we wanted to make a nice, big, well-recorded, lush-sounding record. So it's sort of to do the justice to the messages in the songs.
Yeah. We know that you guys don't like to cover old ground. You like to explore new ideas and sounds. Well, what kind of measures do you take to ensure that you are doing something new and not falling into old territory?
Listening.
Yeah, I mean, like Steph said, we do kind of, obviously, we're aware of our previous records and what they sound like, and what, tricks or toys we might have used on those records. So we try not to repeat those processes. But that also just means, for me, I've turned into a real sort of gear junkie as the years have gone by. So it's about just discovering new toys, new effects pedals, new different guitars, different keyboards. I've become more than ever in the past few years, I've really been discovering old keyboards and synths and stuff. And so it's just giving yourself more tools and new tools that you haven't used before, so that you can create new textures and tones.
Mm.
I think also, just to butt in there, that Paul, in the meantime, between Something for Kate records, Paul's produced records for other people, and become a lot more proficient with Pro Tools, or various recording platforms that he's using. He's been someone who's taught himself how to make really fully fleshed demos, and to record, other bands, and make records for other bands, and I think that those experiences really inform, like I said, well-recorded demos, so that we know when we're going in to record, we've got a pretty good idea of how it's going to sound, and finally having the knowledge to be able to manipulate what we do, and not rely on communicating to someone else.
Yeah.
It makes a really big difference.
And the amount of sonic experimentation you can do, at home in this room is just insane these days.
Yeah.
So, I mean, our first record had pretty much the same guitar tone all the way through, because that was well before the era of home Pro Tools systems and stuff. And nowadays, I mean, you've got with all the kind of software stuff out there, I mean, you've got access to any sound you could possibly dream up.
Yeah. Is that a blessing and a curse? Do you know when to stop?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, it's both. But I am pretty good at reminding myself that art is about making decisions, and so I'm pretty good at reminding myself that you have to make a decision at some point and commit to something. And we're very fond of the term rabbit hole as well, so we avoid rabbit holes.
You chose Nick DiDia as a producer. How do you go about deciding on a producer for a particular album?
It's interesting because we've had quite a few different producers over the years, and there's been times where we've used the same producer for 2 records in a row. This time we really wanted to challenge ourselves, I think, and really sort of we've learned enough to know at this point that making a 3-step process was a really good idea for us. We've learned from making records like tracking and mixing back to back is not good for us. We've learned that it's really good to track and then take it home, live with it for a while, make any changes, and not commit to it yet, and then mix. And I think what we decided to do this time, by having 2 different people, having Nick DiDia track it and then having Howie Beck mix it, was because we really wanted to have their input as different people, and you learn a lot in the process, and to have another perspective as you're doing it is really valuable. So, and they're very different, producers, both of them. And we purposely did that so that we would get this really hi-fi recording, and then take it and manipulate it with Howie, who has more of an electronic background. So it was sort of a conscious effort to mess with what we had done in the past.
Yeah, I just want to pick out a few selected tracks and chat about them. All the Great Minds. Why did you decide to begin the album with that?
It was, I think, for the most part, because it was really hard to sit it anywhere else in the album, because it's such a slow build. It's quite sort of cinematic in the way it moves towards its peak, and it was just really hard to sit it elsewhere on the record. And I think we all just liked the very first thing that people are going to hear on the record is pretty much an unbroken 10 seconds of just one chord on a synthesizer.
Kind of invites you in this gentle way, like it lures you in, as it's like a soft a soft opening before it.
Yeah, but also probably for a lot of people, the first thing they would expect to hear on a Something for Kate record would be like pounding drums or electric guitars or something. So it was just a different way of kicking off.
Yeah. Steph, Inside Job, you've got some really interesting bass parts on that. What was going on there? Did you play around with that one a lot?
Yeah, that one was kind of tricky. It was quite pointy as a song. You know, in the rehearsal room, we drafted and redrafted. We really kind of. It was a challenge to get the verses and the chorus. They're so different. So we tried lots of different things, but just kept coming back to the original composition. And it was sort of this slightly aggressive and a little bit disturbing, but with this beautiful chorus. So it was trying to work out, how to kind of not how it could be connected.
Make it flow.
Yeah, and it's sort of aggressive and beautiful at the same time. But I kind of really liked the pointiness of it. But in terms of recording it, I think once we committed to the original, the composition that we kept coming back to, it was pretty much, I think there's probably a bit of bass distortion on that one and, a bit menacing sounding, but then, yeah.
Yeah, we really kind of had to build that song in separate parts because, like Steph said, it's quite disjointed, which is intentional. Even the lyrics and the subject matter it's about, this sort of, there's two characters that are really different, so that's why the verses and the chorus really reflect that. So it wasn't a song that just automatically flowed. So we sort of had to build it in a way that made it flow. And we tried, like Steph said, we tried rewriting the chorus 5 times because it was hard to make it flow, but we got there in the end. I think now it's this really pleasing gear change.
Our extinguished colleague gets quite chaotic. Did that come out of a jam?
No, that's, believe it or not, that's sort of based around a guitar part that I have been playing for ages, but in this really slow, finger-picked, country-ish sort of way. It sort of began its life as a weird country-ish kind of song. But I just kept messing around with it in different ways, and then I don't know, I don't quite recall coming up with that really atonal guitar part that comes in, but I remember that once I did that, though, it was a very different song, and I liked it in a whole other way. And then it was about ramping up that sort of atonal weirdness. I really enjoy that song. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, the way the pieces fit together.
Yeah, I really love the guitar solo at the end of "I Will Defeat You." Was that planned out? Was it off the cuff? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was improvised. I think
the song was a much shorter song. That whole outro just happened spontaneously, kind of jamming in the studio. Like we just kind of couldn't put a full stop there. We just wanted it to keep going. And yeah.
Well, I think we kept on going as well, though, because we thought, it'll just be a fade out. We'll just put a fade on it. And then we didn't. We just ended up, every time we listened to it, we really liked it, so we kept it.
Sort of falls apart, at the very end. And it just, there's everything you hear in music a lot of the time seems so neat and so deliberate, and sometimes it's nice to just let those things happen and just to even hear things just fall apart and the drummer just kind of give up and, things just kind of get messy. So I think emotionally it kind of just,
It ends up being defeated.
Yeah.
I really like that guitar solo as well, though, because after we improvised it and it was there, then I went back and doubled the guitar solo on a keyboard. So it gives it this really interesting tonal quality, and also just an interesting quality because the guitar is doing these weird bendy things, but obviously the notes on the keyboard are, you know, distinct notes. And I just really like the way it sounds together.
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't really mentioned Clint. Steph, the musical relationship between a drummer and a bass player can be pretty special as a rhythm section. You guys have been playing together for a long time. How intuitive is it with Clint in the studio and on stage? And how do you notice it when you're playing with someone else?
Yeah, it's really intuitive. And because Clint and I, we often joke in this band that we're kind of like the crazy horse. You know, we're like kind of a sloppy kind of. You know, we've had no lessons or formal training. We're just, I came at this from a very punk rock kind of background, and Clint's self-taught, and so we can be quite loose. But I love that. I love that he and I, we're not technically brilliant. It's all about feel. And we, you know, there was a show that we did when we were touring with David Bowie. There was one show that Clint couldn't do. So we had a stand-in drummer for the night, which totally freaked me out. Because obviously you don't really want to be doing that at the Sydney Entertainment Centre.
Yeah.
But with like one rehearsal. But I realised playing with him, with the stand-in drummer, who was an excellent drummer, how sort of much Clint and I kind of move in this sort of, you know, we kind of bend like a tree in the wind. You know, it's sort of we glued together, and when another drummer came in who was almost like a metronome, I was, yeah, I found it kind of weird. It was still a great experience, but it was different. It definitely wasn't as much for me about being glued. It was more about a conscious effort to stick with him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I just want to talk a little bit about the instruments you played on the album, Paul. The main guitars that you used.
I've got, so the main electric guitars were my old Fenders. I've got three 1965, I've got a 65 Telecaster and two 65 Jazzmasters that I've put different pickups in. So they were most of the guitars, most of the electric guitars. And my old, I've got a 70s Telecaster Deluxe as well. And then all the acoustic guitars were, you know, a bunch of different Maton acoustics that I've got. And particularly, I mean, I've got some beautiful Maton 808 guitars that I use live all the time, but I've actually discovered that my favourite acoustic guitar to record with is a mini Maton, you know, those really small-bodied ones. The one I have is just the most beautiful acoustic guitar to record, because the sound just pops out of that little body. It just jumps right out, and it's really got a really present mid-range. It just sits in a mix differently to a full-size acoustic guitar. So yeah, so Maton acoustics, Fender electrics, and a few other weird things that were around the studio. Yeah, and then the keyboards were, I mean, the studio has, Nick DiDia has the most fantastic collection of old analog synthesizers and organs and stuff. So yeah, use them a lot. And a sitar.
Yeah.
The first appearance of a sitar on this record.
Okay. Amp-wise, did you use anything new?
Amp-wise, not really. Over the last sort of decade, I've become a sort of I've become pretty devoted to the good old Fender Twin.
Yeah.
I used to try all these different amps, and I've actually got a little 70s Princeton amp as well that's great to record with, but we mostly used the Twin, and we sometimes used it with a like a virtual cabinet. You know those how do you pronounce it? SUHR? Is it Sir or Shaw? Or?
I think it's Sir.
Sir, yeah.
Yeah.
Nick is a fan of those. We always, whatever amp we were recording in, we always had a signal going into the Sir as well, so that if he wanted to, he could just dial up any cabinet, you know.
Right.
So I was always kind of going through the Twin, but I think on occasion Nick might have, you know, put it through like a virtual Celestion or something like that,
Yeah.
just for options.
Yeah. What about you, Steph? What did you use on the album?
I used both, a couple of Fender basses. I've got an old 65p bass that's been fairly solid sort of guitar that I've had for quite a few years. I also used a reissue, a Fender reissue, and they also sent me a short scale,
Okay.
which I don't normally play, but on this record there's a few songs with bass chords, and I don't have very long fingers, so the short scale, because it's quite high up in the neck, the short scale was really good for that. And in terms of amps, it was pretty much the Music Man, wasn't it?
The Bassman. We actually just, on the way up to Byron Bay from Melbourne, we picked up one of the Fender Bassman Pros, Super Bassman Pro, or just the kind of big new version of the Bassman, which is pretty amazing. I think
Nick was quite taken aback by how good it was.
Okay.
I think he actually had his head is like classic kind of B15 ready to go and stuff, and then went, actually, wow. I got to say, it was, I mean, we used it pretty much the whole time, didn't we?
Yeah, and we've always, in the past, I think you've pretty much used the B15 on virtually every album, but the Bassman this time was pretty hard to beat, and I think Nick ended up buying one for the studio.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just got this depth and warmth, but then if you want a spikier sound, it's really easy to get, and it's just a solid, reliable, quite diverse.
Yeah. So with things opening up a bit now and thinking about playing this album live, will you have to make any adjustments to your stage rigs to play this album?
We're going to have to become a 7-piece.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some additional humans on the stage.
Okay.
We're just sort of philosophically opposed to, backing tracks or triggering things and stuff like that in a live set. It just doesn't sit right with us. So we would sooner actually employ another human being to bring their talent and their energy on the stage. If anything, it just makes things more fun. And we've done that in the past. In the past, we did one tour where there were 7 of us on stage, and we've been 3, 4, 5, 7-piece. So we may just have another recruit when we finally hit the road. But yeah, I'm kind of the resident pedal board builder.
Okay.
And every record I have to sort of build a new pedal board for myself and for Adrian and for Steph. And
do you enjoy that?
Sorry?
You enjoy that? Is that a good part of the...
Yeah, I love it. I get a kick out of it, just, working out the right chain and the most efficient way to get the signal through without killing it and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you guys have been around a long time. What are you most proud of?
That's a good question.
I think the fact that we're just still here doing things exactly the way we want to do them, and that, I don't know, I feel like every, I don't know, how do you say it? It's like,
we've never been a particularly fashionable. I don't feel like we've ever been a fashionable band, like in terms of sounding now, or even in image and all those things. And I think I think one thing that I feel proud of is kind of what Paul's saying, is that we've sort of been a little bit stubborn and kind of just stuck to our guns about things like what Paul just said about not miming, not backing tracks, not, like...
Not having someone dress us or, tell us what to, like we've been stubborn and sometimes, we've been, I don't know, look, I don't know. I just enjoy the fact that we're still here. We feel like we're better than we've ever been musically and better than we've ever been when we play live. And, we've had our fair share of praise and criticism and detractors over the years. And I feel like it's just all made us stronger, and that we're kind of we're sort of an immovable object now in Australian music, and that feels like a good place to be.
Yeah. Well, Steph and Paul, it's been great to chat. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks for your time.